Okay, welcome everyone. We'd like to welcome all participants, community members, staff, and elected officials that are on the call to the Multi-Generational Center Feasibility Study, Service Area 2 virtual community meeting hosted by Parks and Recreation of the National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Next, we'll go into some meeting norms. During this call, we're going to ask that you participate in a number of poll questions. This will be pretty engaging and exciting to answer questions. When prompted, please submit your responses by selecting an option in the GoToWebinar window. Throughout the meeting, we will collect questions, so please submit a question or comment. The planning team will answer questions in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today's meeting will be in English. The presentation materials will be available in English and Spanish beginning November 10th at www.pgparks.com.
La reunión de hoy será en inglés. Los materiales de presentación estarán disponibles en inglés y español a partir del 10 de noviembre en www.pgparks.com.
There will be a meeting and presentation in Spanish on November 17th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Questions, comments, and feedback can be shared with the planning team in English or Spanish. Look for more information on upcoming meetings on the same website, www.pgparks.com.
Habrá una reunión y presentación en español el 17 de noviembre de las 6:30 a las 8. Las preguntas y los comentarios se podrán compartir con el equipo de planificación en inglés o en español durante esa presentación. Obtenga más información sobre las próximas reuniones en el mismo website www.pgparks.com.
So now we'll go into our background and overview. We'd like to start off with introductions of the team. I am Karen Somerville, the host and part of the consultant team. Bridget Stency, who's with Parks and Recreation. Kayla Anthony, who's also part of the consultant team. Amado Fernandez, who's also a part of the consultant team. And lastly, Harold Johnson, also part of the consultant team. You will hear from each one of these presenters today.
So we're going to start with our first poll, trying to learn a little bit more about those of you who are out there in the audience. So you should be seeing the poll open on your screen. And if you don't mind selecting an answer for us, we would really appreciate it. We'll leave it open until we can see a good percentage of people have voted. Just a couple more seconds here. And for those of you joining us, we're just starting our first poll, so welcome. Thank you so much. All right, 90% of people have voted. So I will close that poll and we can share just quickly. So it looks like the majority of people joining us fall in that age group of 30 to 69 years old, but we do have some individuals sprinkled in the 18 to 29-year-old and the 70 and over category. Looks like we'll have to find ways to reach out to more of our 0 to 17 audience in a future engagement. Thank you for answering that. Let's do one more poll question. For this one, we just want to find out what recreation facilities you've used and really in the past year, recognizing that COVID is something that has changed a lot of our participation in things, but in a typical year, kind of how you would recreate in Prince George's County. And for other, that can be a range of things. A lot of it is probably your home or with a friend, backyard, that kind of thing. So we're going to give people just a couple more seconds to respond. Great. Looks like a majority of people have responded, again, hitting that 90% mark. So I'm going to close it and share the results. So a lot of you, and again, you could select multiple answers from this. So a lot of you actually indicate that you are using outdoor parks and trails. That's great. We know the county is rich with those, but then a good number of you are using some indoor public recreation centers, whether that's via MNC PBC or your local municipality, or also several of you are using private fitness centers and private gyms in the area. I'd be interested to hear more of what some of the other answers are. So feel free to chat your answers to us if you want to let us know. Great, so we're going to move on from our first audience poll, Karen, and hand it back over to you for our first speaker.
All right, so we are going now to Bridget Stency, I believe, into demographic data.
Oh, background, here we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Bridget Stesney with the Department of Parks and Recreation. I'm going to spend a few minutes giving you some background on our multi-generational centers and Formula 2040. In 2013, the department, in partnership with the community, developed Formula 2040, a functional master plan for parks and recreation spaces. And this plan establishes a framework that will assure we're thinking about the future for our county and meeting programmatic and facility needs for parks and recreation. The plan also divided the county into 9 service areas, which you can see on the map on your screen, and that was based on a 15-minute drive time. The plan also looked at our indoor recreation aquatic needs and then identified some ideal areas for future multi-generational centers across the county. The recommendations from 2040 are already being put into place and into action. The southern area of our county, which had the highest need for some indoor service areas, will actually see our first 2 multi-generational centers. And now we're turning our focus to the northern and central areas of the county. In developing 2040, we learned that many of our residents don't actually use the smaller community centers in their neighborhood and would be willing to travel 15 minutes or so to find a facility that had more offerings for themselves and their family. And we also found it was more viable for the department to build and operate these larger centers that have a variety of programs for everyone. So these larger centers would serve more people and offer more programs, but also build on the community center model. So they are in addition to the existing network of community centers that we already have on the ground. Next slide. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with your local community center. They might have a multi-purpose room, maybe a gym or a fitness space. But now I'm showing there's on the screen here examples of our first multi-generational models. On the left, you're seeing the new multi-generational center in Brandywine, Maryland, which we call SARC. This facility has a double gymnasium, a track, multiple multi-purpose spaces, a fitness room, and an indoor aquatics component. On the right, you can see our second multi-gen center, which will be at what we call South Tech Rec. The indoor recreation facility is already open, but the indoor aquatic facility is under construction, and we hope to open in early 2021. Those 2 examples that I just showed you are more examples of suburban development, but in these new areas of the county, we'll be looking at building a more urban model. So it's done all over the country. This is actually an example, I think, from Toronto, a YMCA. So we'll be looking for a more urban model for our next multi-generational centers. And then before we conduct any, dive into any major construction project, we do what's called a feasibility study. And here we're looking to inform the smartest approach for our major projects. We want to make sure that the project will be a success and that it'll be a viable project that will actually run on the ground. So basically building a business plan. So 3 service areas you see here highlighted on the map, 2, 3, and 4, had the highest need compared to the facilities on the ground and the number of residents expected in the county. And we also looked at the age of the existing facilities, recent investments, and population growth. So these will be the facilities next, or the service areas next to receive the multi-generational centers. And this last slide here for the background portion really just shows you how the feasibility study and the business plan kind of come together. As you can see, it's a 2-phase process. We're currently in phase 1, and we're doing the public community meetings there, highlighted with the yellow star at the bottom. And this is where we talk about what the facility needs, what the building program will be, so we can think about where this facility will go for the service area and then what it will look like. So this is the first community meeting in our process, and there'll be multiple opportunities to keep the conversation ongoing and to provide more input as we continue to think about the future of multi-generational centers in the county.
Thank you, Bridget, and apologies for the error. Bridget just covered our background and overview. Now I'll hand it back over to Kayla Anthony for demographic data.
Great, yeah, so what have we been up to so far? As you saw in Bridget's graphic there, we have been running a little bit with some behind the scenes analysis, as well as speaking with some internal and external stakeholder groups. So we want to give you an overview of some of the things we've been learning so far, and then get your feedback on that part. So first of all, tonight's focus is on service area 2, and we want to make a note that these service areas, as Bridget mentioned, are based on travel times. So they don't really align with your standard council districts that you're accustomed to. And so we wanted to show a map to help you kind of locate yourself within that service area, so you can understand kind of what this one looks like compared to maybe more of the boundaries you're used to seeing. If for some reason on this map, excuse me, you can't locate yourself, we do have an interactive map located on the website, and there's multiple places in this presentation where you can write down the website there, or if you search Multi-Generational Center and PG Parks, you'll find it pretty easily. So this service area 2 is located within the Beltway. You can see 495 going around the upper edge there. And it also is located adjacent to Montgomery County and the District of Columbia. It's an interesting service area in that there are 12 municipalities located within it. So there's a lot of different constituent groups, a lot of different government entities that are also providing services to this service area. It is a very urban and dense suburban area. The development follows that pattern, but it's interesting in that it's very rich in trails and parks. And so you've got both the Northwest and the Northeast branch trails coming together down near Colmar Manor. You've got Lake Artemisia and several other beloved parks in this rather dense area. But there's also several major roads, state highways that flow through the area as well. Of course, the Route 1 corridor, very well known, but then some pretty high traffic roads, including 410, 450, and 201. And then, of course, there's multiple ways to get by transit. I believe there's 4 existing Green Line Metro stops in the service area, from West Hyattsville all the way up to Greenbelt. But you've also got extensive bus service, and then hopefully one day the future Purple Line, which will run through the central portion of the service area. So hopefully you've been able to locate yourself in the service area, because we're actually going to ask you a question in just a minute about where you're joining us from. But first, let's talk a little bit more about what is offered within the service area. So we've taken that same map you just saw, and we've added either an orangish red dot or a blue square to that map. And the orange dot represents any kind of public recreation facility, whether that's a municipal one or MNC PPC recreation center, including aquatics as well. And the blue ones represent any kind of private fitness or gym opportunity. And we have made one special mark here for the University of Maryland, because we know that this area is unique and that students reside here, and they have several fitness facilities located on campus. But one of the things we learned about this service area is that there are a lot of recreation and indoor fitness offerings, both public and private, and especially when you compare this service area to several of the ones nearby, there are a lot of opportunities here to recreate. There's a range of private market opportunities, ranging from your standard gym and fitness center, but we've even seen several higher priced facilities that may have more of a specialty aspect to them in terms of what they're offering. And then we also know that there's several outdoor splash pads in this facility, from Lane Manor to Hamilton, Rolling Crest, and then there's also one at the Herbert Wells Ice facility. There's the splash pad there. So there are several outdoor opportunities for water features, but there's not a lot of indoor swimming facilities. So really the only indoor aquatics is either at Epley, which is at the University of Maryland, or in the private facility, which is, I believe it's the LA Fitness at Prince George's Plaza. And so really the key finding here is that despite having a lot of facilities in your service area, there's still a need for quality fitness and aquatic facilities that are also more broadly accessible. And so that's one of the things that's kind of driving us as we go through defining what this multi-generational center should be for the service area. What else have we learned? So we've been looking at a lot of demographics. This is just a really high level overview to kind of give us a flavor of the area. And so the top line there you see is really focused on population, what the growth rate is forecasted to be for this service area leading into 2040, as well as how big the area is. And so again, we see that this is a very urban and dense suburban area. And really, when we think about this, this is informing the size of the facility and the spaces that are needed, what we call levels of service. How do we make sure that we're serving this population within this boundary at an adequate level? Then the bottom line there you'll see is more attributes. And so we know that this region is much younger from a median age perspective than the rest of the county. And the average household size is also slightly larger. So there's a lot of families in this area. And it's important that we think about how we serve families across the entire generational spectrum. Thinking about age and household size also influences the activities that we look at going in these facilities. And so those are the kind of data points that help us, help inform us, what should go in the facility, as well as the median household income. So understanding really what people's price point is. This area does have a lower median income than the county's household median. And so keeping in mind what that operational model can actually look like to achieve the county's goal or the commission's goal for a 30% recovery rate. One of the things you'll notice that's not on here, but that is certainly something we have looked into and talked about a lot is how diverse this service area is, both from a racial and ethnic perspective, as well as even an income and age perspective. And then also ethnicity language and country of origin. And a lot of thinking about that is both what their preferences may be for different populations, preferences for the type of activities, and also just making sure that our engagement is representative of what this service area looks like. And so we want to make sure that we are reaching out to the constituents that may not show up to this type of meeting, but we can capture in a focus group or a stakeholder meeting. So that is the demographic overview. In addition to data, we're also thinking about the community's input. And so, as I mentioned, we've done a good amount of outreach to date, just to better understand what some of the priorities are for this service area. And so we have a lot of feedback, but to try to share it with you, we categorized it into three smaller categories. And so one, focusing on recreation, two, aquatics, and then third, this one was unique to the service area, was the importance of the surrounding urban landscape. And so when it came to recreation needs, we certainly heard a need for that indoor fitness and workout space, but also a place where people could walk, where weather will not hinder them from doing that. A place for students and teens. We know that Northwest High School is just north there of the Prince George's Plaza Community Center. And finding an after school space sometimes can be difficult for them. And they often use that community center kind of like their after school home. And so space for them is important. Along with that is multimedia programming and offering computer access. So that's going to be important for the people in this neighborhood or in this service area. One thing that we heard is that while there are several outdoor opportunities, there's not really high quality outdoor fields, and specifically turf fields that can be used and that are usable after significant weather events such as rain that we saw here just a few months ago. So that's going to be something that we want to focus on for this service area. When it comes to aquatics, the key pieces we heard is that need for lap swimming. There's no place for youth to participate in the sport of swimming, or for our seniors to participate in some low impact exercise programs, pool walking, that type of activity, that there's really not any place for them to do that. And so some better swim facilities indoor where they can do that. We recognize that there are a lot of outdoor splash pads that exist in the area. They're very popular, and there may be need for more of that, but definitely a need for the indoor swimming component. And lastly, in considering the service area, recognizing that the physical access is going to be really important, but also a desire to create a place. To connect it to the greater urban landscape and consider what the look and feel of that facility really means. But recognizing that, you know, the existing area where Prince George's Plaza Community Center is, that we really have to improve the walkability around that area and think about how we collaborate with other public services as the new Hyattsville Library comes online. Think about how those two can interact and work with even the high school nearby. So using the community input in addition to the data that we collect, we can conduct and did conduct a participation analysis. And so it's really that data-driven, community-informed program that we're trying to arrive at. And so we know that data can't tell the whole story. And so we want to hear more on your feedback to some of the ideas we're presenting tonight. Based on what we know so far, this is the preliminary program that we see that there is demand for. And so our partners from Hughes Group Architect are going to talk about this in just a minute in the next section, but I'm going to preview it here with you right now. So a pretty large fitness area that would be open for different activities, 2 courts, gymnasium, a double gymnasium where you could do basketball and volleyball, but even open it up to some more creative sports and opportunities, an indoor track, and those components make up a real core component of the multi-gen concept. But then thinking about the multi-use rooms and the dedicated program rooms, what are some of the specific things that you in the community want to see those type of rooms utilized for? What programs and activities are you interested in that can serve you, and we can make sure this building includes? And as I mentioned, we certainly saw a demand for the lap pool and potentially a splash pad, depending on the outdoor program, and certainly a turf field to support the building. So that is going to conclude my demographics section. I do believe we have a poll that we want you all to participate in. So let me launch that. So first, finding out what part, as I mentioned, of the service area that you are joining us from tonight. And it looks like our poll may have missed, we apologize, it may have missed the southern section, which is where Hyattsville is listed. So we apologize for that. Feel free to send us a comment if you're joining, and many of you are clicking other because you probably recognize this. But if you're joining from our Hyattsville, Mount Rainier, Colmar Manor, that area all the way up through, yeah, we've got several people commenting Hyattsville. Thank you for that. We apologize. So I'm going to close the poll and share, recognizing that this may not be perfectly demonstrative of our service area, but a pretty distributed group of people. Thank you. And then our second poll, finding out how you would like to access a multi-gen. So what method of transportation? And we're trying to ask you to pick your top or your highly preferred. And just wanted to note too, as people are answering this question, that there is a question section where you can ask questions if you have any that pop up. We are going to be asking or answering or collecting those questions throughout the presentation and then answering them toward the end. So if you have a question, please feel free to submit it. If it's a pretty simple one, we actually have a team that is able to answer you live. So they will try to get back to you as quickly as they can. So it looks like it's a pretty good split, but we've got an equal amount of individuals that are participating in this meeting who would access a multi-gen in Service Area 2 by car or walking, a split 35% there, and then 21% who said they would utilize a bike to get to it. So we certainly recognize the importance of the Northeast and Northwest Branch Trail, and then 7% by Metro. Thank you for participating. And now I'm going to stop talking and let Karen and Amato get us back to our next topic.
Yep. Thanks, Kayla. Thanks, everyone, for participating in the polls. We're now moving into the building program section presented by Amato Fernandez.
All right. We're going to just briefly start back by the program that Kayla reviewed with you based on both internal and external focus groups and some community discussions to establish this preliminary building program. And what we'd like to do tonight is test that with you, just talk a little bit about what the spaces are. And we have a couple of questions, poll questions that we'll ask you. And as we're going through this, if you have any questions or anything you want to say relative to what we're going to present, please go ahead and type in the question or type in your statement so we have that documentation, because that's really the purpose of this entire presentation, is to understand your how you feel about these spaces and what your preferences are. So the first space is the fitness, strength, and training area, which is the open area of about 7,000 feet. And the component elements in there would be cardio equipment, like jogging and ellipticals with free weights, resistance weight machines, and then some CrossFit component. And that's what makes up the majority of the space. There's an additional component that would be the group fitness space, which is the next slide. There we go. And in the group fitness areas, we would have the ability to do dance, aerobics, yoga, cycling, or Zumba, for example, or any other fitness exercise that becomes popular. Okay, the next group of spaces that we would include are the courts. Again, as Kayla said, the program here is for 2 basketball courts, which would be able to be subdivided and striped so that you could play volleyball, you could play badminton, you could play indoor soccer, futsal. So there's a lot of opportunity within that the 2 basketball court area. That would also include an indoor track, which is above the basketball area, so that it doesn't interfere with what's going on down below. You could both those activities can occur at the same time because you're on different levels. And you could also do other activities such as kickball, roller skating, and pickleball, for example, depending upon the preference and depending upon the striping on the basketball court. The next slide. The multi-use rooms that we talked about, those are rooms that would be able to be used for multiple purposes depending upon either whether they're rented or whether they're scheduled for things like religious services, civic association meetings, after school activities, birthday parties, town halls like this one, community meetings, and community gathering. That's the other important component. It may include a warming kitchen, depending upon whether the multi-use rooms are going to be used for functions that require the ability to prepare food and serve food. So, okay, the next group of rooms that we're going to talk about are dedicated program rooms. These are activities that require the space to be designed or fitted out a certain way, specifically. And that could include anywhere, things like senior activities rooms, a teen activities room, esports and e-gaming, computer technology lab, culinary instruction, or an incubator kitchen. And that is whether we have a room that would teach about cooking, or whether in fact you would actually cook inside the room, in the room for either personal use or small business. Health and wellness space, boxing, preschool and childcare, or martial arts. There's a lot of choices here, and so here's where we're now going to do a 2-part poll that we'd like to hear from you about what your preferences would be for these types of spaces.
Right, so I'm going to launch part 1. And so the question here, let me open up a poll. You can see we're wanting you to select what your priority would be for these specific spaces, which ones would have a highest priority for you, and then we'll test the second set of spaces in the next poll.
So you can select up to 2 here, correct?
We have a few people that are saying they can only select 1. So I
Oh,
wonder if our poll is limiting our ability for them to select.
Kayla, let me go in and open that option up.
Okay. I'll wait till we launch the second one. So at least in terms of selecting only one option, it's a pretty even split, but most people would prefer space for gathering. So whether that's a specific demographic or like a health and wellness and social services space. So again, that's with selecting the one option.
That poll has multiple options now if you wanted to relaunch.
Let me see if I can relaunch. All right, we're going to try this one more time. Thank you, Karen. So let's relaunch it with the ability for you to please select 2. So which of these you would prefer? And Karen, while they're doing that, will you just check that the next questions allow that as well?
Yep, they do.
Awesome, thank you.
thank you.
We've almost hit our threshold. Thank you everyone for participating. I'm going to close it. Seems like everyone has participated and share, and it did not change very much. So
Excellent.
Thank you for participating. Let's launch the second one there. So again, when it comes to dedicated program space, which of these would be a priority for you in terms of dedicated program space? Going to give people just another couple of seconds. Seems like most of the voting has stopped and closed. All right, so a large majority of you identified computer and technology lab as a dedicated program space need for the service area, but then gymnastics or cheer, martial arts and boxing, both over 30%, and then an esports desire at 20%. So thank you for participating.
Thank you very much. Now, the other component that we that was discussed was the aquatics component. And aquatics, we have a recreational swimming component of aquatics, which includes lap swimming for recreation, learn to swim programs, therapy and wellness for water aerobics, or full recreation where you have an indoor splash park, you have a lazy river, you have slides, and it's so it can range, and then you can add, for example, zero depth entry to access the water for children and for people with disabilities. So that all is part of what would be incorporated into a recreational swimming aquatics facility. The next slide. We also have competition and instructional swimming able to be done in the facility. A rectangular pool, for example, that's used for laps can also be used to host swim meets. If it requires a few additional things, but it's the same pool. We have diving as a potential ability to be done, and lap swimming, of course. So, thank you. And then we have finally the outdoor programs. There are two different things that can be done with the outdoor programs. We talked about having a turf field, which would be a multi-purpose rectangular field that could have soccer, football, lacrosse, field hockey, and a more dedicated outdoor program such as baseball or softball. These outdoor programs can be done on the ground, i.e. if there's enough land available, or if not, if in a more urban environment, they can be placed on the roof of either buildings or parking areas to be able to provide the same facility if we lack space. The outdoor programs also, the next slide, can include more passive recreation, such as walking, jogging trails, playgrounds, community gardens, outdoor pavilions, and picnic areas. So with that kind of takes us up through all the spaces. And we have another poll where we'd like to ask you a little bit about the various spaces that we've discussed, what you think about them. So.
Yep, so of the high level spaces, which of these would you say are a priority? And again, asking you to select two of those.
And this may be a hard choice because you want them all, but we'd like to see what the two highest priority are.
give folks just another minute to vote as we hit about 70%. All right. So a large percentage of participants here are interested in that flexible multi-purpose space. And then just under half identified fitness, strength, and training as an important area. But then, as you can see, courts came in pretty close behind that, and then group fitness and dedicated program space. Let's do a second poll. So again, higher priorities for you, helping us understand what you're interested in about the multi-gen program. All right. Give people just another minute to participate, and just a reminder that you can ask questions or provide additional comments in the box. You're seeing some of yours, and I think they're answering a few directly to you. All right, 70%, there we go. So for this one, participants indicated that aquatics is their primary need, but then followed quickly by that outdoor field for active activities, then an indoor track, and then passive outdoor space, garden, picnic, etc. So thank you. We appreciate you participating in those polls.
Thank you very much.
Oops.
Now we'll turn it back over to Caleb, Anthony, and Harold Johnson for potential location presentation.
Y'all are going to be tired of me. Just 2 slides for me, I promise. Okay, so one really important aspect of this feasibility process is obviously identifying a site and a location. And so I think the first question would be, well, what does that process look like? And so at a very high level, we wanted to show you what that process looks like and where we are in that process. Again, a reminder that this process is an 18-month long one, and we've only just begun in identifying the building program itself, and that is a crucial part of defining and searching for a piece of property where we can put this multi-gen center. So first is determining what the actual building footprint or size is going to be and what our requirements for a site would be. Based on that, we can develop a location strategy and understand what the requirements for that would be. But what we really want to understand is what your priorities might be for a site in this area. And so once we have those 3 things in mind, we can identify what our sites are and we can collect data. We've started doing this a little bit, which we'll show you in just a minute. We have heard from some of our stakeholders their ideas about what a potential site could be and where we should look. We would welcome you to give that input as well. So you know what comes next. After we have this list of sites in hand, we will then begin to evaluate them. And so applying the criteria or identifying if the site meets our requirements for a multi-generational center, conducting that due diligence, technical analysis, what potential risks or opportunities might exist to developing on this site, or if we have to purchase it, what potential risks or opportunities are there, and coming up really with that short list of sites. What are the ones that we're going to focus on the most? And that's when we will have to enter more confidential outreach and potentially some site visits, especially if it's not a site that is already owned by the commission. So that's where we would have to go into the selection mode of reviewing internally any kind of legal analysis that might be required, If it's a purchase, the negotiation, or if it's a reuse or disposal, what that might look like, and that would be internally reviewed. And then ultimately, a final decision, which would be made public. So that is a high level, pretty fast paced overview of the process, but do want to show you what some of the requirements that MNC PBC is looking for in a site for this type of facility. And so they're really in three categories: location, site and land, and then sustainability. And so the first category of location is making sure that the site provides regional appeal to the whole service area and really connects to that broader network of what the commission offers to residents in the county. How does it interact with the trails that are existing or other parks in the area? And then making sure that the site is accessible and that we are equitable in how we locate this multi-gen concept. So that's important in determining what the location will be. Then there's the site itself. So, physically, can the site fit a multi-generational center on it? And once we have that box and what that looks like or how big that is, we can determine if the site can do that. We know, especially in this service area, the importance of different modes of transportation. And so recognizing that we want a site that can be accessed in multiple ways, but that parking and other outdoor amenities are still important to the site. And so looking for places where that can still be maintained. And lastly, understanding what the potential cost may be if it's a site that's particularly hilly, if it's particularly expensive to purchase, what might some of those costs be for a site? Are there any environmental goals that it can help us achieve? If we have to purchase it, will it align with the schedule goals for developing one of these? And ultimately determining if that site is suitable for a multi-gen. So that's again, what a very high level of what the commission is looking for in these sites, but we want to understand what might be important for you in thinking about the location. And so just a poll with two simple answers and recognizing that sometimes these things are in the same place, but in recognizing that there's trade-offs that come in selecting a site, which of these might be most important to the community in identifying a place for a potential multi-generational center. Give just another couple seconds here. All right, so a slight preference for the location being a place where people could access it from where they live. So proximity to residential area seems to be what this group prefers slightly. Let's launch another one of those trade-off questions. So again, thinking about location, recognizing that sometimes these are in the same location, but sometimes they may not. And so when we think about trade-offs, what is more important to you all? Give it just another second. Karen, it seems like the second option on this one was, did we, oh, I think it's right. Okay, I'm gonna close this one and share. All right, so again, a strong preference in this case for finding an area that may be underserved. I think the option on this one was actually messed up. The major transportation was on the previous one. Karen, is there a way to fix that question This one was supposed to be the major activity center or near retail. So I'll let,
We can fix that.
yeah, Karen will work on that, and then we can come back and ask that one again pretty quickly since it's a quick one. Okay, Harold, I'm gonna hand this over to you and let you chat more specifically on our sites.
All right, well, thank you, Kayla. First, on Formula 2040, it focused in, especially in this service area, a specific area of that so far meets specifically some of the criteria that 2040 identified. 15 minutes, for residents to commute to the site itself within that circumference, near an existing community, their existing community center, and more specifically, there were some existing sites that currently the commission own, and we can show you that on the next slide. And specifically, currently the commission owns the Prince George's Plaza Community Center site, which is, and the Beth Tor site, that is right at the corner of Adelphi Road and Toledo Road. And then the Hyrick Park and Field, which is just across from the mall and right behind the Home Depot, and that's right off of 410 East West Highway. And one of the most important aspects, as we can see from the programmatics that Armando spoke to previously, and some of the commission's requirements that Kayla speak to, was the fact that can the specific site meet and fit the program? Is it suitable in every way, or can we get part of the program on it or all the program on it? And because this is an urban site, and more specifically, it has a great geographical location centering all of centering so much of the community within the service area too, especially for the transportation, the high traffic volume. It has many residents that really encompasses those sites. So what we have to do is first go back and understand each of the current sites that the commission own. Does it meet those specific requirements? And more importantly, what is the impact to the program and to the community that the site is in? And can it meet all of the needs that you're currently giving us advice on, as well as what came out of the commission's report on the 2040 formula? And so with that, I'll just add Kayla back to it, turn it back over to Kayla.
I was muted, sorry. We've got a couple of polls here that we're gonna launch, and we'll relaunch that last one. And I think the idea here being that, obviously there's this focused area where the commission owns some existing land, and trying to understand what about that might be a benefit, what of it might be a drawback. But real quick, let's redistribute this last poll that we did with more of our answers that we were looking for. So it may not change our input, but give you just another second. Great, all right. So it did change slightly when we added major activity center and as the other option, but I think I'm still hearing a resounding support for looking toward an area that may be underserved by these recreation components. So let's launch our second poll for this. And so this is thinking, again, when we think about trade-offs, a lot of times, especially in an urban area, when you have a lot of program elements trying to be fit on a site, and you have an area where you may not be able to find really large sites, it becomes this trade-off game of balancing, looking for the ideal program versus the ideal site. And so we just wanted to understand from you which way you might lean on that question. And I promise, for those of you answering, there's only 2 more polls for the evening. So we're polling a lot, I know, but it's important. We appreciate your feedback. All right, close. I'm going to share. So a slight preference for more of that ideal location, recognizing that there may be a need to reduce the program, but overall pretty balanced in terms of your thinking on that. So we'll have to certainly understand more there. Okay, here's the final 2 questions. So when we think about the Prince George's Plaza Community Center area and locating a center here, we want to understand what is a benefit of the area. So what do you see as something that is a positive or a pro in terms of locating one in this area? And then we're going to ask you the inverse question next. So what might be a drawback? But this one is what do you see as a benefit to this area? Just another second. All right. So y'all are quite an even bunch, relatively distributed evenly, but it seems like most of you view it as a pretty easy place to access when it comes to foot, bike, and transit. And then second would be it being a visible, welcoming place for the community. So what about drawbacks? I'm going to launch this one. It has the exact same answers. So what might be some drawbacks to the Prince George's Plaza area? All right, so let's share. So some drawbacks. Interestingly, a lot of you selected other, which means we need to understand more about what you might see as a drawback to that area. So I would love if any of you who selected that option or would like to add more information there, please type that in the questions or the chat box. We're receiving that feedback directly. And the reason we'd love to understand it is, one, we want to make sure that this location is serving this community, but two, those drawbacks are oftentimes the ones that we can try to control for. So we can try to find workarounds. If it's a pedestrian access issue, then how do we think about improving that? If it's something specific, we can think about that when it comes to developing the specific site. So thank you for participating in that. We are now going to, that concludes the presentation portion of this, and now we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So I will show this slide here. And Claire, does it look like we have any questions that we should answer? Yeah.
We do. We're going to feed you some questions that we've been trying to answer along the way, but some that we haven't gotten to yet. There was a question about, has the county thought about incorporating access to non-traditional sport activities like skate parks and pump tracks? Don't think they will fit in these sites under consideration, but what about farther out areas?
So I think that's a really good question. And I mean, Claire, I know you asked it, but do you and Bridget want to say anything just about more broader county initiatives when it comes to other types of recreation?
So we are looking at all different types of activities that could be done in conjunction and complementary to a multi-generational center site. Skate parks are something that we've been looking at countywide, and we do know, have a good grasp on what the need is in the different service areas for skate parks. What I would say is, if seems like there's an ideal site for it, we would definitely consider some of those non-traditional sport activities. I don't know necessarily pump track would be one of them, but pump tracks are also something that we've been looking at a lot, especially for our regional parks, as it makes a lot of sense in those areas. So yes, definitely something we'll consider, but in an urban area, because the sites are tight, there might be some other non-traditional sports that we'll consider that make more sense there.
Great.
We had another question related to the poll questions. And this question was about that the questions about location didn't necessarily align with the first questions about where people evenly said they want to use bike, walk, or car access. Can you explain a little bit more about why those two questions were asked?
Ask that one more time.
Sure. There was a poll question about location, and people said that they want to bike, walk, or drive to the multi-generational center. But then there was a second question about location that said, is it more important to you that the multi-generational center is located somewhere that's easily accessible, but might not have all the components, or has all the components, but not as easily accessible? So like why we're looking at those two and kind of the trade-offs that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think anytime we are developing a facility, there's going to be trade-offs, correct? And I think one of the things is understanding what's important to the community and what's going to be driving how they use the facility, because obviously we don't want to build something that then the community is not going to come and utilize, support that doesn't reflect what it is that they're looking for in a multi-gen. And so I think part of it is understanding how you might access it, but then also recognizing that it may not be able to do everything. And so what might be more important to you in terms of how you access it, and that, we may have a trade-off in terms of which one we can prioritize. Does that answer, Claire, what you were getting at?
I believe so. We had a number of questions about the PG Plaza site and wondering if the PG Plaza site is large enough for a multi-generational center.
Great question. So the answer is we're not sure. It is certainly a small site. I pulled up the slide here to show you. And so one of the things we know is that the community center is located directly next door to the Beth Torah site, which the commission also owns. And so what you see in orange there is the existing site and parking, plus a second site that is further up Adelphi Road that is also owned by the commission. And so when it comes to evaluating that site, we would be looking at that entire property for potentially putting a multi-gen there. But we do know that that is a very tight site when it comes to fitting both the indoor and outdoor components of a multi-generational center on it. And so that is one of the reasons that You know, we've tried to zoom out just a little bit and look at the broader area here around the mall at Prince George's, what opportunities might be available to be creative, whether that's working with the mall, with a lot of the surface parking that exists in the area, looking at other you know, land in the commission's inventory. So Hyrick Park is certainly one that popped up on our radar when you think about the connectivity that it offers to the trail system, and again, that it's land that exists in their portfolio, its proximity to the elementary and middle schools. But you know, the answer really is specific to the community center. Likely not that both indoor and outdoor programs would fit on that site, but we are going to look at what could fit there and understand if, you know, when we define what the building should have and what the site offers, you know, do those match up or not? So that's part of what this process will ultimately determine.
Thanks, Kayla. We have another question, and it's related. The commission also owns the old 94th Aero Squadron area and the Wells Linson area. Ideally, all of these elements are in one location, but if not all, say aquatic or fields, can be co-located, can these be built in multiple locations?
That is a great question, and something that Harold is smiling because we've talked about this a lot over the recent weeks. And how do we think about, you know, we use this term, you know, network of offerings a lot. And so how do we think about how this facility from an indoor and outdoor perspective fit into the broader network? And I think we are open, and the commission is open to considering this, whether together on the same site or in some type of connected network model. And so I appreciate you, you know, mentioning those sites that we can certainly look more into after this. But I think the answer is yes, we're open to it, but we certainly want to make sure, especially when it comes to defining the operational model, that something like that will work. Because when you get two facilities, then you need, you know, two sets of oversight and that kind of thing. So we are open to it, but we'll have to explore more of what that might look like. Do you want to add anything to that, Claire? Or?
No, I think that's a good answer. Very complete. Why stick to the multi-generational center concept? Why not build some programs as networks which are distributed in the communities? One example can be community garden networks, preferably for underserved areas.
Bridget, do you want to take a stab at why multi-gens, or do you want me to? I know that was part of your section, so.
Sorry, I had to find that mute button. The multi-gen model is really to build upon the community center model. So it's not replacing them, and it's to hopefully help. The idea is to complement and bring more services and programs to a service area that folks will be able to bring the whole family to enjoy. So that's the idea. I don't know if, you know, Claire and Kayla, you can, you know, feel free to, you know, to build on that. But that's the, again, 2040 kind of found that folks are looking for, be more likely to go to a destination and bring their family if there's more to offer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that there was a lot of outreach that was conducted as part of 2040. I was not a part of that effort, but certainly have read up and tried to understand as much of it as possible. And from that, I think they really were able to understand user preference in the county and specifically the service area, to inform that, you know, this multi-gen model can offer a lot more than your smaller community centers are able to. And so that was the major theme and finding that that plan determined should be the next model for the commission.
All right. We have another question about tonight's crowd tonight and our outreach. It says tonight's crowd is not necessarily reflective of the majority of people who will use the center. How do we plan to include the voices of immigrant bilingual families in the areas that are not in this meeting?
Yeah, thank you for asking. The easy answer is that we have a second set of community meetings that are planned for November 17th, 18th, and 19th. That will happen in Spanish. And so we have a full team that will be conducting those. in Spanish language and then conducting the polls in Spanish. We will also post the poll online in Spanish so that those individuals can participate in that method. And then in terms of outreach, Claire, do you want to talk a little bit more just about outreach and how we're making sure to reach a broad swath of the community?
Sure. In a digital world, we've been doing a lot of digital outreach, which I realize is not the ideal outreach for some communities. We are trying to work with our council members' offices to reach the communities that they work with on a regular basis, and we'll be providing an advertisement for those Spanish meetings in Spanish. We didn't want to do them at the same time to confuse anyone about which meeting they're supposed to be going to, but we will be doing that. And we've done a lot of social media. We've done a lot of reaching out to local economic development groups and asking them to share this information. So we've really relied on our network to share, but we know that there's always more that we can do. So we're definitely open to suggestion as well.
Thank you for that question.
Yes, thank you. Was there any conversation with the library in reference to expanding with Prince George's Plaza Community Center?
So I can answer what I know, and Bridget, you may want to chime in. The library really got going out ahead of this effort. And so obviously that is something that is in progress. Where construction is past development of this. We have conducted outreach to library staff as part of this, and that was a key part that when we talked to the director of the Prince George's Plaza or the Prince George's Community Center, that we knew that was something that he was also trying to establish a good working relationship across them. But Bridget, I don't know if you want to add specifically to how the multi-gen might relate to development of the library.
I don't know, and not necessarily the library. Unfortunately, that was, like you said, the timing didn't align. But I think what we do know is that partnerships are, will be a key to a successful center, here. Yeah. So as we learn more about what the center look like and what the program needs are, we do see partners as have a high value. I don't know, Claire, if you want to chime in more on the libraries, but I don't have any more to add there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, the alignment of the two projects, had it been a perfect world, they would have aligned better than they did. But one of the things that we can do, and we have tried to do, is reach out to the library for complementary programming. We know that they provide a lot of programming for the students at Northwestern High School after school. They provide a lot of programming for English as a second language. They provide computer services. So making sure that they're going to be our neighbor. And we want to make sure that we coordinate with them, that we do some joint programming with them. There's plenty of programming partnership opportunities, if not physical partnership opportunities. But obviously, if the site that's chosen is PG Plaza, there are lots of physical programming opportunities or physical site opportunities. There was a question about the 15-minute drive time and how we came to that 15-minute drive time conclusion. Did we use traffic? Did we use just a buffer in GIS? How do we do that?
Do you want to talk a little through that, Claire? Or do you want?
Yeah. So the 15-minute drive time, it does use traffic. And if you look at the service area map that you saw before, you'll see that inside the Beltway, the service areas are much, much smaller, and outside the Beltway, they are larger. And that is because of the fact that we did account for traffic. An average traffic at an average time of the day. So is it necessarily during rush hour? No, it is not. It used some average traffic counts. But generally inside the Beltway, they're smaller service areas, and outside the Beltway are larger service areas. Sorry, I'm reading through some of these.
You're fine.
Are there any considerations for extending the existing biking trail network to connect to the new center and/or explore supporting and protecting bike lanes along 410 in the corridor?
So I think that that would certainly be something that is important to the center in making sure that it is part of that bike trail. I think we've seen a huge increase in biking, certainly through the pandemic, but even through the growth of this area and just how important bike trails are. In terms of expanding them, that would be something, Claire, you might want to speak on that, but I know that in terms of locating this along bike trails, that's certainly something that we think is important and have heard support for.
Yeah, I would say that we're always trying to increase connectivity. When we work with private developers, trying to make sure that they are making trail connections to an existing trail network, making connections to our sites, as well as other sites of interest in the community. This is 100% something that's going to be really important for this project in particular, because we know that a lot of people will be accessing this via walking or biking. So for example, if we choose a site that does not have a large enough acreage to accommodate some of those outdoor facilities, we might try to make sure that we can make connections to nearby facilities by enhancing that bike and pedestrian network, so that people can easily access, say they have an indoor sport, they come and they want to work out and then they have to be at lacrosse practice afterwards, that they can easily go from one place to the other, and we can coordinate our programming among our various sites.
I think there was a question also on using the centers and membership cards, kind of how membership works. Do you want me to ask the question specifically, or just kind of?
Sure. We can chat about that.
So
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I think the biggest thing is that, there is an existing model for the community centers and what membership at those looks like. And they've established the model for SARC, which is in Service Area 9, and South Tech Rec in 8, for what their membership model looks like. But we have not yet defined what the cost and membership for this facility specifically would look like. I don't know, Claire, if you want to add to how that. And
yeah, we're looking at various pieces, and it'll depend on what the program is for this site. It might be that there's a base membership and there are some premium activities that you would pay extra for. It might be one flat fee. We're going to have to look at all the costs and make sure that we are providing services that everyone can access at an affordable price, while also making sure that some of those premium facilities and programs, while they might be a little more, are still at a reasonable price for a government agency to be offering its residents.
Yep. And I think that's also where a lot of that data that we learned on income, but also we've received a lot of that feedback in our individual conversations and stakeholder outreach about the importance of accessibility when it comes to price. And so that's certainly something that we'll be keeping in mind as we develop the program and what the associated operations looks like.
I think we've gone through most of the questions. There were a number of comments. We'll be going through these and making sure we take all of your comments into account. I'm trying to go through a couple more and see. There was a few questions about the Home Depot site. I'm not sure if we have any more information to provide on that, but there were some questions about looking at that site.
Yeah, thank you for including that.
Yeah.
Harold, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, but I think certainly proximity to Hyrick there is important.
And definitely the access off of 410 and its close proximity to the metro. So whereas any urban site, we would have to figure out how do we fit the outdoor activities in. Home Depot can be a possibility because of its close proximity to already owned assets, that the commission has, specifically the park. So it's easy connectivity there, and there's easy access off of the highway, as well as direct connection to Metro. So I think that, and the bike easily to add, you know, bike lanes and things like that that could connect the community. You know, there is a bridge currently that connects over top of the highway to the actual shopping center and the mall, which can be revisited in terms of making sure, you know, it is the right type of connectivity that we need, safety and all of that.
Great. Any other questions, or we think we covered the majority of them?
I think we've covered the majority, and we will reach out to some offline.
Okay. So just in closing, thank you all very much for participating, by being here tonight, by participating in our polls, providing your thoughts and questions. You see the website listed, a shortened link that'll get you to the website. So please take time to write this down if you can, and visit for more updates there. There'll be opportunity for you to provide more feedback there. We're going to post our survey. So I know one of the things we'd love for you to do is any of your friends, your neighbors, your community groups that may not have participated tonight in making sure that this is representative of the entire service area and in our communities, share the link with them. The video will be posted there, and then they can actually take this same survey of polls that we provided to you, so that we get better feedback that represents the whole area. So please do share with your friends, and thank you so much. Everyone have a great night.